All right, let's pray. Dear God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the many blessings you give us, and we thank you for the freedom and opportunity we have to come and worship you and to learn about you, Lord. And we especially want to thank you for the freedom we have this weekend in honor of Memorial Day. And we just want to honor all those who have sacrificed their lives so that we can have this privilege to be able to come and worship you and to learn more about you, Lord. Just ask that you continue to bless us as we go through your class and learn more about you and who you were and how you interacted with the world, and that we take this out and spread it to the world and bring others to you. And it's in Christ and we pray. Amen. All right, we're going to continue on. At this point, Jesus is still heading towards Jerusalem, and some of it he's popping in and out of some of the temples there. But he's at this point he is traveling to his death, and that's his purpose, and that's his goal at this point. So we continue on with here. Jesus heals a man with swollen limbs, and again, this is you'll see here. This is the Pharisees attempting to trick Jesus, but Jesus, knowing their intention, actually gets ahead of them a little bit. And so we'll read that, and we're going to the first 3 or 4 lessons sections here is actually one whole conversation or one whole area where Jesus was at in this house. But we'll start with the first part here. So Luke 4:1-6. One Sabbath day, Jesus went to eat dinner in the home of a leader of the Pharisees, and the people were watching him closely. There was a man there whose arms and legs were swollen. Jesus asked the Pharisees and experts in religious law, "Is it permitted in the law to heal people on the Sabbath day or not?" When they refused to answer, Jesus touched the sick man and healed him and sent him away. Then he turned to them and said, "Which of you doesn't work on the Sabbath? If your son or your cow falls into a pit, don't you rush to get him out?" Again, they could not answer. And so so Jesus didn't just get an honorary invite to a head Pharisees or one of the leaders of the Pharisees' house. All right, and the fact that this man with swollen limbs was there at the guy's house was not a coincidence either. All right, because honestly, the Pharisees and stuff like that, they didn't have a lot to do with people like that. They stayed away from them. And so what they were trying to do here is set Jesus up. One, it's the Sabbath day. They invite him over, and they make sure that a man with swollen limbs is there who needs healed. And so Jesus, Jesus, understanding what they're going to do, flips it on them, and then asks them, "Okay, what's your thoughts around this? Is it permitted to heal?" And then they refuse to answer him. So they were trying to trick Jesus, but Jesus flips the script on them real quick, and then he says, and then he uses the example. Well, which one of you, like, if your son fell into a pit, who wouldn't you get him out, or are you going to wait till the next day? Yeah, and so he's using the same thing to show, hey, look, someone I love is hurting here. I have the ability to help them. I'm not going to wait a day, just as if you wouldn't do the same thing. And so he's exposing their hypocrisy and everything there. So what's interesting here is Jesus' continuation. A lot of people in the religious world were afraid to confront or have anything to do or try to go up against the Pharisees, and Jesus constantly did. Jesus constantly went up against them. Jesus constantly, challenged them and exposed their hypocrisy. And then that's why they wanted to kill him. More than anything, that's why they wanted to kill him, because he was not afraid to challenge them, and he was not afraid to point to them who they were. And the more he did this, the more power, as you want to say, they started to lose, because he was encouraging the common people to do these things. So, go ahead. Yes.
We're studying about how they smell like sheep, and Jesus was the good shepherd, and he actually drew people.
Yes. Yep.
They were not only not afraid to come to him, they were eager to come to him, and I think we need to look at that very, very closely, in our own lives. So, am I approachable? Do people want to come to me, or are they afraid to? And if so, why are they afraid to? I think it has to do with
I agree. I agree with that. And that was the of all the things you see about Jesus and who he was and how he was. I mean, there was very few. I don't think there's any incidents where you see someone was afraid to go to Jesus and ask for something. Now, some of them may have been timid, or some of them may have, reached out in a different way. Like the lady who just knew all she had to do was touch him, right? But still, he absolutely drew people to him, and I don't think it was just the healing aspect, or that was a plus. But I think it was just who Jesus was. People saw who he really was, and the amount of love that he had for people, and seeing that, people are drawn to that. One of the things I've been working on for a class and a lesson series is looking at the New Testament church and how they were and why people were drawn to them. People weren't drawn to the New Testament church because of the traditions or the things they followed or the things they did or any of that stuff. They were drawn to the New Testament church strictly because of love. It was how much they loved each other and how much they loved other people, so much so that they were willing to die for strangers or take in babies who'd been discarded and raise them as their own. That is what made the New Testament church so attractive, and that's what drew people into Christianity at that time. And so it's interesting to look at that and see what all that looks like. I mean, and Jesus, you see that with Jesus, and then you see that in his church in the early in the New Testament as to why everyone was drawing to them. And so our goal should be to be the same, to have that same appearance and to look the same. All right, any comments, anything on that? All right, so then Jesus transitions, and I don't think he said all this like one right after the other, but Troy, would you mind getting me a bottle of water? Thank you. But I think these are just conversations that they had as they were going through this meal. I don't think this was, Jesus said this, and then he said this, and then he said this. I think this was just, he was at this guy's house, and so he would point out things and in conversation, do this. So he continues on in verse 7 and through 14 of Luke here. When Jesus noticed that all who had come to the dinner were trying to sit in the seats of honor near the head of the table, he gave them this advice. When you are invited to a wedding feast, don't sit in the seat of honor. What if someone who is more distinguished than you has also been invited? Thank you very much. The host will come and say, give this person your seat. Then you will be embarrassed, and you will have to take whatever seat is left at the foot of the table. Instead, take the lowest place at the foot of the table. Then when your host sees you, he will come and say, friend, we have a better place for you. Then you will be honored in front of all the other guests. For those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Then he turned to his host. When you put on a luncheon or a banquet, he said, don't invite your friends, brothers, relatives, and rich neighbors, for they will invite you back, and that will be your only reward. Instead, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind. Then at the resurrection of the righteous, and pay attention to this, because Jesus emphasizes this over and over and over again throughout his messages and through everything. God will reward you for inviting those who could not repay you. And well, I'll talk about that in a minute. So Jesus is there observing, and this was the tradition and we still kind of do this today, and it's the opposite in the church. You try to get to the back instead of being in the front. But what they would do is when they would come and sit, it was an honor to sit on the left hand and the right hand side of the host. The closer you could sit, the more honored you were. And so what people would do is they would fight to sit at the most honored position. And a lot of times it was up to whoever was hosting to say, hey, you sit here, and that would bestow the honor upon them. And Jesus says, just kind of like he says to his apostles about who, the greatest, the greatest will be last. I mean, I'm messing that one up. The least will be first, and the first will be last. All right? And it kind of flips that whole dynamic on its head, because they were trying to fight to be, say, who's going to be the greatest? Who's going to sit on the left and the right-hand side of Jesus, right? And who's going to be the greatest? And Jesus is like, no, this isn't how my kingdom works. The way my kingdom works is if you want to be first, then you need to put yourself last. And so he's then taking this same message to them, saying, don't sit there and fight over who's going to sit in the most honor position. Go and sit at the last. Go sit at the end, and then you'll be honored by them asking you to come forward. Right? You put yourself last so you can serve and be honored in a different way. And you think anyone ever went to sit somewhere and asked to move? Yeah. It's like, hey, this is someone else's seat, you need to move. Even if it's an accident, is that not embarrassing? Now imagine if you're in this situation and you're trying to make yourself more honorable than you are, and it's like, God, the leader of the house comes to you and says, hey, I'm going to need you to go sit at the very bottom or the very back. And so Jesus is saying here, we've got to learn to humble ourselves, and it can't be a false humbling of yourself, where a humble person doesn't let everyone know they're humble, right?
They're not even aware of it themselves.
Sometimes, and so I put in here on the end, how can you humble yourself? Some people try to give the appearance of humility in order to manipulate others. Others think that humility means putting themselves down. And so there's two different things. There's others who they can look how humble I am, and try to, like I said, try to manipulate others, and look how humble I am. Look at all the, look how I'm putting myself last. And then others intentionally degrade themselves and put themselves down to try to kind of put themselves at the bottom. And those are not what Jesus is talking about there. And to truly humble yourselves, the only way you're going to do that is compare yourself with Christ. If you actually look, and this is one of the things I like in this study, is, a lot of people like to say, well, I compare myself to, you look at David, and, if David could be the man after God's own heart, then what can I do? And you compare yourself to the Apostle Paul and all that stuff. And that's good. And there's nothing wrong with that. I relate with Peter a lot, right? But the thing is if you set Jesus as your standard, Jesus came and set the ultimate standard. No one can come close to touching the standard that Jesus set. So if you set yourself to that standard and compare yourself to that standard, then you will always be humbled, or you should be, because there's no way you can attain that standard. There's no way you can get up that high. And so that's when I say be humble, or when Jesus is talking about humility, that's the kind of humility, you don't put yourself last so that you will be exalted. You put yourself last because that's what Jesus did. Steve. Mm-hmm.
And he always had us put, for budget goals to be X amount of dollars, right? $1 million, $2 million, $5 million, whatever, right? And then over here to the other side is the ultimate goal would be 0.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like what Jesus is saying, ultimate goal is here.
It's here, yep.
You're not ever going to get there, but as long as you're striving to get over here to that, you're going to get there eventually.
Yeah. And that's kind of how we do something similar at Lowe's with our safety standard. Our safety standard is no one gets hurt in the entire year. Right? That's our goal, because we don't want anyone to get hurt. I mean, it would be kind of ridiculous to say, well, we hope only 5 people get hurt this year, right? And so we know, you've got 1,000 people working over there every day, 24/7 almost, right? 365, we take a couple of days off a year out there. It's inevitable when you got that many people and that much machinery and that much, forklifts and all this stuff running around, something's going to happen. All right, but our goal is 0. And it's to say that it should always, safety. And so that's just similar variation. You know that's impossible. I know that I cannot reach the standard that Jesus set. I know that is impossible. All right, but I'm still going to strive for it. Yep.
Goal, but
yep.
You may never get to that goal, but that is what you aim for every time.
Exactly. And every Christian is comparing themselves to the goal of Jesus and the standard that he set, then we get away from this, well, look at so-and-so, or look at so-and-so. It's like, no, All right, so-and-so sin may be worse than mine, but it's still sin. All right, I don't need to be comparing whether my sins are worse than this person. I need to be comparing whether I'm hitting the standard that Jesus set. And so that's the type of humility that we need to set. And so the last verse here, and I tried to point this out because I want us to understand, I think a lot of times we think that we're going to be judged based on a lot of the things that we did, right? And there's some truth to that. But I want to get to the ultimate thing. If you look at Jesus' standard, and he talks about this about entering the kingdom of heaven also, God's going to, his judgment around you is ultimately going to end up in the responsibility of how did you treat other people. It's a theme over and over and over again in his message. When you become in front of him in the pearly gates, it's not going to be how many times did you go to church, how many times did you take communion, how much did you give. It's going to be how did you treat other people. That's what it's going to boil down to. And you see this over and over. And God is sitting there saying, God will reward you for inviting those who could not repay. Basically, he's saying, because this whole thing is, they would always invite their own people, right? They always wanted to be around their own people. They always took care of their own people. But, he's talking about going out and doing the things, getting the people that they said that they didn't want to have anything to do with. The lame, you look at the people that he talks about in here. All right? I'm sorry, I missed that. But I'm sorry. Instead, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind. Well, they didn't want to have anything to do with those type of people. They considered them unclean. They didn't want to be around them. And God's saying, you're going to be rewarded for this. Not, just having everyone else that you know and you have in your little bubble. It's getting outside that bubble and getting the people that you think are clean. Dad, were you going to say something?
Yeah, but you done moved on.
Okay. All right, that's fine. Anything around humility?
You know what, Ted, I'm with people along with you. Ted Michael, as you know, my brother-in-law, ministered the gospel. He up in Ohio for several years, and he told me one time that I got a gentleman I want you to meet. He's a member of our congregation. He's an humble man. He's a loving man. He's sweet as all get out. So he's a rags to riches story. Started with nothing, has a corporation that has businesses all over the world. He's a bazillionaire. He said, but you got to hear this man's story. So he introduced me to this gentleman, and man, I had a million questions I wanted to ask him. He grabbed my hand, started praising me for preaching the gospel, said that's the most important work in the world, and started asking me questions. We talked for 30 minutes, and when I left, I realized I had not asked that man one thing, and he meant it to be that way.
Yep.
I was humbled by that.
Yep. And that's, humility can be a hard thing sometimes. We are so proud, and even in, like I said, you got to be careful, and even in trying to be humble, sometimes you exalt yourself in trying to be humble, and so true humility is a hard work. It's a hard thing to strive for, and so, all right, and so he continues on in verse 15 through 24 here. And hearing this, a man sitting at the table with Jesus exclaimed, "What a blessing it will be to attend a banquet in the kingdom of God." Jesus replied with this story. A man prepared a great feast and sent out many invitations. When the banquet was ready, he sent the servants to tell his guests, "Come, the banquet is ready." But they all began making excuses. One said, "I've just bought a field and must inspect it. Please excuse me." Another said, "I have just bought 5 pair of oxen and I want to try them out. Please excuse me." Another said, "I just got married, so I can't come." The servant returned and he told his master what they had said. His master was furious and said, "Go quickly into the streets and the alleys of the town and invite the poor, the crippled, and the blind, and the lame." And after the servant had done this, he reported, "There is still room for more." So his master said, "Go out into the country lanes and behind the hedges and urge anyone you find to come so that the house will be full. For none of these I first invited will even get the smallest taste of my banquet." So the man, it doesn't really say who he was. It was just a man sitting, he may have been a Pharisee, he may have been a religious leader, he may have just been someone of, high standard that they invited. It doesn't really say. But, as Jesus is talking about this, he claims, it's like, well, what a blessing it's going to be to attend the banquet in the kingdom of God. And he's right. I mean, he is right. What he said is true here. And so Jesus then flips on him and says, well, you're not going to be able to protect, well, not necessarily this man, but he's talking about Jerusalem here, and they would have known this when he starts using this thing. He's talking about the Jews and saying, look, you've killed my people. I have invited you, and you've just got rid of them. You've ignored me, right? And so the comparison here is, in that day, it was customary, kind of like we do with wedding invitations now. We kind of send the save the date card, and then we send, a lot of times, we'll send the regular invitation. That's what they would do here. They would say, hey, they would send a message out saying, hey, I'm going to have this feast, or I'm going to have this party, I'm going to have this celebration, whatever. And then they would send out another one saying, hey, the feast is ready, y'all come on. Let's go. And so what Jesus is comparing here is basically Moses was the first invitation. All right, the first invitation of Jesus, and then there was a follow-up. And then Jesus is that second one saying, hey, we're ready. We're ready. But he was rejected. Right? And they come up with all these silly excuses. No one buys a farm or a field without inspecting it first. All right? No one buys oxen without trying them out or making sure that they can do the job first. All right? I'm not sure the one about marriage. I don't know. I just got married, so I can't come to a thing. I don't know. Maybe he was just trying to blame his wife. I don't know what the reasoning for saying. But it's just these excuses of, well, I can't come to this and that. And so basically he's just giving silly excuses for why people, because they knew that. I mean, they knew in that day you didn't go and buy a field, because field was for agriculture there, without making sure that you could actually grow something in that field. The Coggins, they don't go and buy land if they're going to be planting somewhere or maybe leasing land. They don't go and just, Mike doesn't just come and say, hey, you got a field. Sure, yeah, okay, yeah, I'll give you this much for it and write a check. He goes and he inspects that field. He's probably going to do some soil tests on that field and all these other things. So same thing with oxen. In our days, you could call it a car, truck, tractor, whatever you want. Very few people go and buy vehicles unseen. If you're going to buy farm equipment, do you go and buy farm equipment without looking at it? Yeah. Yeah.
People buying real estate,
That's
virtually or whatever.
Yeah.
Crazy,
Yep. There's some truth to that, Troy. But yeah, a lot of them are.
Now that the pandemic's over,
Yep.
people want to see something and try it.
Yep. Well, I'll give you an idea, and it's kind of off. Like me and Helen, we bought our Ford Explorer sight unseen, but I did go down here. Well, I say sight unseen. I did go to Langdale Ford and drove one that was very similar and got an idea, and then it was nice. I drove up. We were there 15 minutes, and we drove back, and so. But anyways, I mean, but for the most part, especially back in this day, you didn't do those. You just didn't do those type of things. So people were just making excuses here of that. And he was comparing that with rejecting Jesus. And then he's also saying, okay, you've rejected me, so now I'm going to go out into all the world. I'm going to go everywhere, and I'm going to invite everyone. And he starts talking about the lame and the blind and all those people, which is a comparison with the Gentiles. He's saying, look, my message is, you were the first invitation, you rejected me, and so now I'm inviting everyone to this party. And so that's how the parable of the grace feast works. And so this is that continuation of Jesus showing what his kingdom's going to be like, who's going to be part of his kingdom, and a lot of times insulting in a way the Pharisees and stuff by saying, look, that very last sentence there, for none of those I am first invited will get the smallest taste of my banquet. He's saying, yeah, it's going to be wonderful, but you're not going to get to partake in it. Yeah.
The takeaway here for me, the big takeaway is what you just said. Those people are not going to be in heaven.
Yep.
Nothing has changed. You hear accept their excuses then, he's not going to accept our lame excuses today.
No, he's not. All right, so then he rolls into, and this looks like, it doesn't say whether he had left or what has happened, but this is a transition away from the lunch or dinner that he is at on Sabbath day. So Luke 14:25 through 35, this is teaching about the cost of being a disciple. And I really think I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this because we really need to pay attention to this section of verses right here. We really, really do. Because I don't think we focus on them enough of their importance and what they really mean. So 25 through 35, Jesus here talking about being a costly disciple. A large crowd was following Jesus. He turned around and said to them, "If you want to be my disciple, you must, by comparison, hate everyone else." Now, we know the Greek wording here means to love less, all right? So we're not literally going around hating people. The Greek term here is to love less. Your father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even your own life. Otherwise, you cannot be my disciples. And if you do not carry your own cross and follow me, you cannot be my disciple. But don't begin until you count the cost. These next three, those three things there, I think we miss a lot of times. For who would begin construction of a building without first calculating the cost to see if there's enough money to finish it? Otherwise, you might complete only the foundation before running out of money, and then everyone would laugh at you. They would say, "There's a person who started that building and couldn't afford to finish it." Or what king would go to war against another king without first sitting down with his counselors to discuss whether his army of 10,000 could defeat the 20,000 soldiers marching against him? And if he can't, he will send a delegation to discuss terms of peace while the enemy is still far away. So, you cannot become my disciple without giving up everything you own. Salt is good for seasoning, but if it loses its flavor, how do you make it salty again? Flavorless salt is good neither for the soil nor for the manure pile. It is thrown away. Anyone with ears to hear should listen and understand this. And he's not just talking about, he's talking about him start from the time he started talking to the time he said, anyone with ears, that is what he's talking about. He's saying you need to pay attention to this. This is important. And I think sometimes we forget to focus on it. I think we don't like this section of Scripture because it makes us uncomfortable. All right, we don't like what this says. If I'm going to be honest, I don't like what it says. All right, go. Yep. Yeah, exactly. Go ahead. Sorry, I'll get you.
There's another part of Scripture, I don't know where it says, put your hand to the plow and turn away is worse for you.
Mm-hmm.
So the title here is the cost of discipleship. You have to decide first if you're ready to do that. Because if you're not ready, you won't hear the word, and you leave, and you turn away from it because you're too lazy or not committed enough, then you're going to be judged more harshly
Yep.
than somebody than an infidel who's never.
Yep. Yeah, the Bible talks about what it's going to be like for those who heard the message and then rejected it, or heard it, accepted it for a while, and then rejected it. Either way. And so when I say that, when Jesus was telling these people that they have to carry their own cross, they understood what that meant. Right? I mean, I guess today it would be the same comparison of carrying your own electric chair or your own lethal injection. Right? If you're carrying a cross, you're dead. Right? There's no, you're going to be hung on that cross and you're going to die. And so what Jesus is saying here, yeah.
God didn't stay on the cross.
No.
He went to the tomb and continued on to the resurrection when he said, "Pick
Yeah, yep, go ahead.
Everything that we're talking about right now points back to verse 26. It says, if you don't hate your father, your mother, your wife, your children, your brother, sister, your own life, you cannot be my disciple.
Yeah.
Real simple. It's not hard.
It's not hard in understanding.
No, that's what it means.
It's
not hard to do.
yeah, yeah.
I said it's not
Yeah,
hard to
it's not hard to understand this in that you've got to give up everything to God. Your whole life, everything. Jesus becomes more important than everything. Your spouse, your children, your job, your business, your everything. Your money. Yeah. Yep. And if you're not, then he points out, and then he says, if you're not willing to die and to follow me, then you cannot be my disciple. It's not, well, you won't be a good disciple, or you're kind of a bad disciple. It's you cannot. All right. And then he says, don't start this journey of carrying your cross, of putting me first, unless you count what that's going to cost you. And this is where we get in trouble, I think, a lot of times when we talk to people about Jesus.
That's right.
Because we'll oh man, you come to Jesus and your life will be better and all, and that's wrong.
There's some out there throwing this.
Yeah, well, in the end it will be.
Your life will be better, but there is a cost to it.
Yep.
It's not free. It's not a bed of roses.
Yep.
It's not always going to be happy times and flowers all over the place.
No.
You know.
Right.
But there are earthly, temporal rewards for living a Christian life.
There are.
They're not just Christians
Yeah.
that take on earth until we get to heaven, and then there's the eternal reward.
Yeah. No, there.
Marriage, we have
Yep.
respectful children, we have successful businesses, we have a good reputation in the community. There's lots of things that we would, that we should have. That, for example, my brother, who's not college, doesn't have.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. What in this sense, there are rewards for being a Christian in the sense of, I mean, statistically you can see that around marriage, around your all kinds of stuff, health, long life, those type of things as that we can see. That's math, statistics, science, you can see it. But in a worldly sense, and I think we all know this, there's a sacrifice to following Jesus. There is a sacrifice. There are things that will be rewarded on earth. I'm not, it's not like you're going to come to heaven or come to Jesus and everything's going to be absolutely horrible, right? But it's that comparison of when you come to Jesus, you step out of that darkness into the light, and then all of a sudden you're being attacked. You are being attacked, and that's the fight that you're going to have to carry on. And then in Jesus' day here, he's talking about counting the cost, especially to these guys, because there wasn't going to be a lot of benefit for them being Christians and followers of Jesus. Every single one of them he's talking to right there get killed for following him. And so that's the thing that we have to be ready to do that. We have to be prepared to do that. Steve, go ahead.
Sacrifice.
Yes.
I mean, you have to give up your time. You have to give up your money. You have to put in effort. You have to put in study.
Yep.
I mean, you just don't show up and hey, it's all here.
Yeah.
You know, it requires you to do things.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not saying
But
there's things that are manifest out of your faith and devotion to God.
yeah. And in Christendom today, and it's even creeped into the church here, not here, but the church, is we've kind of set the standard of a good Christian as a person who might pray, who might read his Bible, who goes to church maybe hopefully once a week and gives. Right? And that's kind of the standard we've set for Christianity in America today, for the most part. Not we, but as a whole, if you look at Christendom, it's like, well, they're a good Christian person. It's like I know people who can say the same thing. I know people who, all but going to church, do the same thing. Right? They read their Bible, they pray, and give, all that kind of stuff. And so we've got to make sure we don't get caught up in that kind of standards. Well, as long as I check these little check boxes, well, that makes me a Christian. Because you're not going to see that anywhere in the Bible. And so That's what I want to get. And then finally, he ends this. He ends this whole thing. Again, you cannot be my disciple without giving up everything you own. All right, and that's not just that's not just applied to the disciples there. That applies to everyone who wants to be a Christian, who wants to call themselves a Christian. You've got to be able to not be, give up everything you own. Give it all to God. It's all His. And so that's where we've got to get to that understanding. And I think if we were to really grasp and really understand the meaning of what this is, our lives would look a lot different. Yep.
He could do everything Christ asked him to do. He could live up to the standards of the law, but he could not give up his riches.
Yep.
And give up everything, sell it, give it to the poor, and follow him.
Yep.
So he walked away.
Sad. Yeah.
Yeah, he was so sad because he couldn't give up what was most important to him in this world.
Yep. I wonder what Jesus' answer would have been if he would have said, yeah, I'm willing to do that. That would have been, I would love to see the alternate ending to that story. Yeah, well, they did. Yeah.
And when they were confronted with that, Christ or the world, Christ or material things, Christ or whatever.
Yeah, Max. Yeah. Yeah, he was tax collectors had money back then.
But he was very wealthy, and he did give up all that to go to Christ.
Yep. And so that's and it's not saying, a lot of people take this and say, well, I got to give up everything and become poor and desolate, and that's not what he's talking about. Right? He's talking about being willing for anything that God asks you to do, even carrying a cross, right? That is what God is asking us to do. Steve.
You know, my Bible says this. I thought it was pretty good. The cost Jesus warned is complete surrender to Him.
Yep.
That's what he's talking about. He's not talking about material things. He's talking about all things.
Everything. Everything you own. Everything you have. Everything.
I overthink everything.
Mm-hmm.
not pray at all. So if I prayed for him to change and become a Christian, this would be putting my money where my mouth is. Do
Yep.
I really believe God can use little, don't just live by example, do something. So maybe I could have. Maybe that would have been the thing that shocked him the most.
Yeah.
Like, wow,
Yeah.
they've been praying for me, they actually believe in me, they're invested in this. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So that's the kind of stuff that keeps me up at night.
The thing that you said there that caught me the most is it's not logical, right? It's not logical to do those things. And to the outside world, Christianity is not logical. And in a lot of sense, in our own mind, following Jesus and doing the things He asks us to do is not logical. It goes against all logic we have, right? It's but I think that's like I talked about earlier. What the early Christian church did to the outsiders was like, this is crazy. Man, this isn't logical at all. Why are you going and grabbing these babies and raising them? Why are you willing to let a lion eat you? Why are you? I mean, all this. That's not logical at all. But that's where the Bible says I forget the exact term. But basically, the knowledge of God or whatever seems foolish to the world, right? Yep. Steve.
There's a song on Christian radio that's crazy people.
Crazy people. Yep.
You think about some of the stuff, in the context of normal
Francis Chan's got a book called Crazy Love, or is it Bob?
That's Crazy Love.
Is it Francis Chan or Bob? Okay, yeah, man.
That's why he left the church.
That's why he left the church. No, he didn't leave. That's why he left the mega church scene that he was part of. Yeah, yep, yep. All right, so let's go real quick. Go ahead, Dan.
One thing, when Jesus tells us, and this isn't a suggestion, he tells us, you count the call to follow me. He's not saying that to discourage anybody.
No.
He's saying that because when you truly count the call, you're going to see you getting the best deal of
Oh, yeah.
eternity to give your simple, worthless life as it is, sinful self, give it to Christ, and inherit eternity. You
Yep.
won't get a better
Yeah, you're not a better deal than that. You're getting something that's invaluable, right? You can't put a cost on it for really something that's worthless.
I was looking here. It says in Matthew 20:16 and 22:14, it says, "Many are called." This is Jesus.
Yeah,
Many are called, but few are chosen.
yeah,
And all these people you talk about go to church, and they have checked off all the boxes. I guess they didn't read these verses here.
yeah. I'll say this: we're going to be surprised by people who are in heaven, and we're going to be surprised by the people who aren't in heaven.
That's right.
And so, pay attention very closely to that section. All right, let's go through this real quick. Jesus teaches about the parable of the lost sheep. This is Luke 15, 1-7. Tax collectors and other notorious sinners often came to listen to Jesus teach. This made the Pharisees and teachers of religious law complain that he was associating with such sinful people, even eating with them. Do we do that today sometimes? So Jesus told him this story. If a man has 100 sheep and one of them gets lost, what will he do? Won't he leave the 99 others in the wilderness and go to search for the one that is lost until he finds it? And when he has found it, he will joyfully carry it home on his shoulders. When he arrives, he will call together his friends and neighbors, saying, "Rejoice with me, because I have found my lost sheep." In this same way, there is more joy in heaven over one lost sinner who repents and returns to God than over 99 others who are righteous and haven't strayed away. And I highlighted that last section on purpose because there's a lot of times where we'll get caught up in self-righteousness. All right? And that's the human nature, and so I'm not just trying to call people, but Christianity, sometimes we can get caught up in that. It's like, well, man, look what that guy's been doing. Why are you celebrating? He was having an affair. He was doing drugs. He was, you're doing all this horrible things, and y'all are going to welcome him and be happy about him coming, And it's like, well, look, I've been out here, look what I've been doing. This is direct, and that's exactly what he's saying. And that you're right. And that's the kind of point I'm trying to make is. Yep. Look how good I am. Yep. Yeah, look at that horrible guy. Yep. And I say this all the time, and I try to emphasize this all the time. We are no better than the people who aren't Christians. No matter how horrible they are, no matter what they've done, we're no better than them. The only difference that we have between us and them is that we've accepted Jesus. That is the only difference. If it weren't for Jesus, we'd be going the same place they were. Whether their sins were more than ours, however you want to count it. And so that's when we try to get into the mindset of Jesus, we need to make sure that, yes, it's good that we're here. It's good that we're Christians. It's good that we are doing our best to try and be the people that God and Christ wants us to be. But we've got to be careful that we don't start judging the outside world and making it look like, oh, well, we're much better than them, and not, because what happens when you start doing that, you stop going out, you just become the 99, and you stop going out trying to find the lost. And we see that a lot in Christendom today. Churches have become country clubs and social clubs for their own people, and they've stopped doing what they're actually called to do, which is go out and search for that one lost sheep. Steve.
Humble earlier, right? That is how you stay humble.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, the only difference between you and everybody else, y'all sinners,
Yep.
still sinners, still in the same plane, except for you. You said, "Hey, wait a minute, I'm a sinner. I need
Yep.
help."
Yep. Yeah, it goes back. You if you set Jesus as your standard, you don't compare yourself to other people. I'm comparing myself. We all look like filth when we're comparing it to that standard. So anyways, all right, so next week we will continue on. Jesus goes through several parables here, and we'll get into that next week. Thank you.